I've taken a lot of road trips in my life, but never one like I'm going to take today. I love a road trip. You know, spending a day behind the wheel, just seeing the countryside rolling past the window, getting to detour and seeing places and things that you just don't see when you choose the quicker, you know, faster, easier way of flying. But I've never taken a trip quite like the one I'm going to do today. Melbourne to Sydney without an engine. I'm going to be driving this, the all-electric Porsche Macan. Now, I can hear the naysayers, you know, warming up the keyboards already to complain that, you know, electric vehicles can't, you know, travel such vast distances, that it's sort of an impractical and, you know, improbable solution to Australia's vast landscape. Well, I've heard that a lot, and I want to see if it's true. I want to drive this Macan. It's got an extensive range, nearly 600 kilometres on a charge, so it should be able to get me from here in Melbourne all the way out to my hometown of Sydney in a relatively quick fashion. Now, just to be clear, this is not going to be a speed run. This is not, I'm not going to race up to Sydney and try and go exactly as fast as I would if I was just going to drive a petrol car and, you know, only stop for fuel in it and keep on driving. That's neither safe nor enjoyable, to be blunt. Instead, I'm going to enjoy the road trip. I'm going to experience the countryside. I'm going to maybe take a detour. I'm going to find an Aussie bakery and enjoy a country pie, because what is a road trip without a pie? But that's the plan. So it's a long way to go, so I'm going to jump aboard and get moving. So, as I navigate my way out of Melbourne before the traffic gets, you know, too bad, let me kind of explain the rough plan for today. For those unfamiliar, it's about 900 kilometres, just under 900 kilometres between Melbourne and Sydney. Now, typically in an internal combustion car, you know, you're going to drive along, you can refuel and just get on the road as quickly as you want. But that's not what I want to do. That's not the experience that I want to have, even if I was in an internal combustion car. You know, just stopping, refueling, going again, that's not a road trip. That's just a really, really long commute. So for me, the experience is going to be, okay, what's the infrastructure like? Obviously I've scouted ahead. I've had a look online to see where my options are to recharge. Now, obviously the, you know, refueling experience will be a little bit longer in the Macan. In an electric vehicle, it's going to take longer to recharge the batteries than it is to just refuel a tank of petrol or diesel. But, you know, that's a road trip. If you plan, you know, you got to stop, you got to take breaks, you got to hopefully try and experience, you know, a little bit of the journey along the way. So I do think that with the right stops, timed at the right time, there's really no reason why an electric vehicle road trip should actually take significantly longer than doing it in an internal combustion engine, if you are, you know, like I say, really just enjoying the ride and not, you know, rushing with every fibre of your being. So that to me will be the test. You know, hopefully we can get into Sydney at a reasonable hour and it'll be an enjoyable rather than a, you know, endurance test. Okay, so we're a couple of hours into the drive now, and it's been interesting really watching and trying to understand, I guess, get an understanding of how the battery really get discharged today. You know, I said, look, I'm confident we should be able to make the trip, and I do think that's the case, but it's been interesting to watch. You know, you can't help but watch the range of the battery. So it's been interesting to know that the battery has been depleting at a faster rate than we've actually been covering kilometres. So it's not really a one-for-one you know, equation there, so that we are using more battery than we are covering mileage. But I think there's a couple of factors in that. One, as you may have noticed, my particular Macan here does have a roof box on the top. It's empty, I'll be honest, but it's, you know, it's obviously, as aerodynamic as it is, it's still going to create more drag and therefore chew a bit more battery. Drag is the enemy of efficiency, but it is what it is. I don't think it's making a massive difference. I think what has made a bigger difference is the wonderful Victorian winter. Like, we have been driving through really foggy conditions, really, really cold, you know, like low single digits. I think the temperature got down to about 3 degrees. Now, that is the other enemy of battery efficiency. It's cold weather. So hopefully, as the day warms up, we'll actually get a greater efficiency from the battery, and we should hit those range targets that we want. Having said all that, I certainly think the official claim of over 600 kilometers of driving range feels pretty optimistic. Like, the car had around 475 indicated when we left this morning, and I think that probably, you know, I'll be happy if we can get around 450. You know, and that's part of it. You know, look, not all you know, internal combustion cars produce, you know, hit their targeted fuel economy figure, so it's not exactly you know, a gotcha for electric vehicles, but it is an interesting sort of side note that, you know, certainly those headline grabbing figures, you got to remember that, as even though we sometimes say they're a more real world test cycle, they are significantly, you know, there's still a significant amount of that is really theoretical rather than practical. So I would think, like I say, if we can get around 450 k's of range, we'll actually make our trip nice and easy. We'll hit all of the charges we want to get to, and it should be fairly smooth sailing, hopefully, once it warms up. So things are not going quite to schedule. As I mentioned in the car, the roof box is creating more drag than anticipated, and it's actually chewing the battery faster than hoped. So we needed to do a top up. Thankfully, we're coming to Beechworth anyway, and Beechworth happens to have an EV charger here. So while I go hit up the bakery, the car's going to have a bit of a feed itself, and then we can get back on the road and back on schedule. So it's a funny one. Just the whole idea of range anxiety, you worry about it, but come to small town Australia and you'll surprisingly find a lot of electric vehicle chargers. So it actually, you know, reduces any sense of anxiety. You know, I know that, you know, even if this continues during the day, there's actually plenty of stops between here and our final destination to keep us charged up and on the move. Okay, so we've made it to our first scheduled charge stop. Now, thanks to that little top up in Beechworth, it's actually taken a lot less time than we'd originally hoped. Should have the car topped up in around 30 minutes. Now, that's in part thanks to that top up, but also because we've managed to find a 150 kilowatt ultra fast charger here. This is an EV charger, and that's topping it up at a pretty solid rate, about 120 kilowatts, which is a pretty significant, it's a pretty speedy way of getting electricity into that battery, and the Porsche can take it. No, it's not as fast as just putting petrol or diesel into a car, but it has given us a chance to get out. I've stretched my legs, I've had something to eat, had a bit of a breather, and now I can get back in, tackle the next stretch, and hopefully get deep into New South Wales before we have to stop again for another charge. When we talk about sort of the vastness of Australia and the distances between places, this is what we're talking about. I'm now approaching Torquecafe, which is, geographically speaking, the halfway point between Melbourne and Sydney. This is really kind of the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's some beautiful places. It's an amazing landscape to drive through, watching the rolling hills, and the way it sort of changes and evolves as you go. It really, to me, it's a big part of why I love a road trip. But it does also make you think, I've been driving a long time, and there's still a lot more driving to go. You know, that is the very nature of Australia. There's these big distances between places. So, you know, that's just part of the trip. And it's interesting that in researching this trip and planning to take an electric car between Sydney and Melbourne, the amount of chargers in this area, Torquecafe, Holbrook, Gundagai, there's a lot of charging stations littered up and down this Hume Highway, and it allows you to really achieve what we're doing. This is the key to achieving what we've done. Is companies like EV and ChargeFox and NRMA and RACV have invested a lot in a public infrastructure. There's a lot of talk about public infrastructure in Australia, and as electric vehicle sales have actually slowed down to a bit, that investment in the infrastructure has continued, and that has allowed you know, a little bit of a catch up. And so I think the infrastructure is actually at a point now where it's quite good, and certainly the fact that we can drive these huge distances is a big win. Like it allows you to do that if you really want to do that in your electric car. So hopefully Torquecafe will get it charged up, and that'll get us almost to the edge of Sydney. All right, so we're finishing up our charge. We're almost done charging up in Torquecafe. Now this hopefully is again going to set us up for our next long leg. Look, certainly as places to stop go, this isn't the nicest place we've been. It's just a regular old truck stop. But as I mentioned before, it's fantastic the amount of infrastructure that is now up and down the freeway. You know, we've got multiple chargers here, so you can top up quickly and easily. And I got to say, the charging networks have been quite easy. Once you get them set up on your phone, there's a bunch of apps that you need to have: EV, ChargeFox, Ampol BP, or there's a few of them. Get them set up. If you've got an electric car, you should have those apps on your phone. And if you do have them set up, the charging process itself is fairly straightforward. Plug it in, turn it on the app, and away you go. Just leaving Torquecafe now, it really does ram home the fact that the cinematic masterpiece cars demonstrated to us many years ago, you know, progress comes at a cost. You know, as we've bypassed all these small towns like Torquecafe and Holbrook and so on, you know, they have really struggled, you know, and it's sad to see. And in some ways, like I said earlier, it's nice that these smaller towns can now lure tourists back in with, you know, EV charging. It's a way to get people into town, and I do hope that towns like this are able to, you know, I guess find a second wind. You know, get another surge of interest, because you know, small towns in Australia are, you know, I think some, you know, fantastic places to visit, and so hopefully. You know, ironically, the progress of electric vehicles might actually help bring back some of that that was lost. Okay, so here we are. We've made it to the final charge. We're just south of Sydney. Interestingly, as we've gotten closer to the major capital, it's busier. We've showed up here. There's 4 charges, which I thought would be fine. 3 of them were full. So luckily we got one spare. So I've got the car on charge. Luckily our photography car does need to get on the charger as well, so luckily someone has moved off. But it's interesting, look, there is a lot of naysayers and doom and gloom around electric cars, but they obviously are growing, and seeing them in the real world like this at a busy charging station does demonstrate that there is a market there for these cars, because they are getting more practical, they are having longer range, and therefore you can do these longer trips outside of town. So there you go. One day, 900 Ks of driving and not a single drop of petrol used. Look, did it take us longer than it would have in an internal combustion vehicle? Sure. But I loved every minute behind the wheel of the Macan today, and it's demonstrated in doing this that it is built for the great Aussie road trip.